All right, so we're officially moving out of macromolecules and into what the cell does. This video is really an introduction to the history of how cells were kind of discovered and what they were and what they did. There's a couple things that we have to pick up from this, and the couple of things that we have to get are, one, who were some of the people that saw cells in the first place? Two is a thing called the cell theory, and the people that were involved with the cell theory, and three, the different types of cells that there are. Then we're going to move into cell organelles, but this video is really kind of focused on those three things. So here's the idea behind what we're doing here today. We're going to talk about some of the people that were involved with discovering discovering a cell. This is Robert Hooke, this guy right here, handsome gentleman, that guy with super nice hair. A lot of times people have been told that, or I've been told that he looks like me with hair. I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't know where that comes from, but that's Robert Hooke. And Robert Hooke, he's really kind of responsible for being the first person to look at cells through a microscope. In reality, he was looking through a very crude microscope. Crude means that it doesn't really, it's crappy. It's not the best microscope that there is. He's making stuff up. It's basically taking a magnifying glass and then said, wow, I see things bigger with a magnifying glass. A magnifying glass. I wonder what it would look like with two magnifying glasses. Whoa, it's even bigger. So that's basically what Robert Hooke did. He used a couple of lenses, made a compound light microscope because he used the sun to bounce the light back up and through the microscope. And so he made his own microscope, compound light microscope, to look at things. And what he looked at was cork. Now, where do you find cork? Usually in a wine bottle. And what is cork? Well, you don't really find it. It comes from a tree. But they take the inner portion of the tree and they create a cork and shove that into a wine bottle. So that's what he did. He took the cork from a wine bottle, he shaved off some pieces, and he took a look and saw what he was on there. So he said, it comes from a plant, so plants must be made of cells, so all living things are made of cells. And so it must have cells. So he shaved off the cork, he took a look in there, and he saw the first couple of cells. So on your paper here, you got your main ideas, you got your scientist, Robert Hooke. He's the first person to use a crude microscope to look at cells. Then you have Anton van Leeuwenhoek. I'm sorry, let's skip ahead a little bit. There's his crude microscope. Here's the picture of what he saw. Those are the cells that he saw. Then you got Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Anton van Leeuwenhoek, another handsome guy. He made a better microscope than Robert Hooke's, and he was the first person to see something actually moving, the first real living thing. And Anton van Leeuwenhoek called what he saw animalcules, because that rolls off the tongue nice and easily. Here it is right here, animalcules. So he took a look at animalcules through the microscope. And in reality, what animalcules are protists. They're protista. So as far as your paper is concerned, and what Anton van Leeuwenhoek had added to this was he was the first person to see something that was actually moving. First person to see living stuff. Protists. He saw protists. Not animalcules. He called them animalcules, but that doesn't roll off the tongue very nicely. They were protista. He had a stronger microscope, his microscope 200 times. And so he was really able to get in. He took pond water and looked at pond water through the microscope. And that brings us to the actual cell theory itself, which is these three guys right here. Okay? The cell theory states, let's skip ahead a little bit here. Okay? The cell theory says these three things. They say all living things are made of one or more cells. So if you're alive, you're made of cells, period. Even bacteria, at least one cell. Next, cells are the basic unit of structure and function for all organisms. And so basically what that means is you can't get smaller than a cell and still be alive. The things that make up the cell, the organelles, the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, those things in and of themselves are not alive. Those things are working together to make the cell, which is a living thing. And finally, all cells arise from existing cells. All cells come from cells in the first place. So there you go. There's your three answers. What are the parts of the cell theory? There's 1, 2, and 3. As a matter of fact, if you flip the page over and take a look at number 4, a friend tells you and read somewhere that rotting garbage can turn into maggots. which are fly larvae, and the maggots then can grow into adult flies. What part of the cell theory could you use to refute that claim? If you look at those things, all cells have to come from existing cells. Every cell, including the maggot cells, have to come from existing maggot cells. So they had to have been there in the first place. They had to have gotten there somehow. You can't just have garbage and then have cells spontaneously arise from garbage. It doesn't make sense. It can't happen. It has to come from somewhere. Maybe a fly laid their eggs on the garbage, and then the eggs, so there's the egg cell, that egg cell gave birth or gave rise to the maggot. So there's your three parts of the cell theory. So let's go back to the people that were involved with that. That's Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow. There we go. So we've got Matthias Schleiden, a German botanist. He says that cells make up every part of a living thing. So this is really kind of where it starts. It started with Schleiden, and what you could say, he was a lawyer actually. He was a lawyer, decided that he didn't like what he was doing with law school and didn't like practicing law, and decided he liked plants. He was way more interested in plants, so he made that his living. He studied plants. And he was the first one to notice that the nucleus was a big deal. He was the first one to say, this guy right here, he was the first one to say, you know what, the nucleus is really controlling everything that's going on inside the cell. So as far as the things that you need to know for this is, he was the first one, he says cells make up every part of a living thing. So every living thing is made up of nothing but cells. And he also said that the nucleus was important. Two big things going on with Schleiden. Stop looking at me, Schwann. It's Billy Madison. It's a good movie. Never saw it? German physiologist. That's kind of like a doctor. Basically studies the body and what's happening with the body. Theodor Schwann noticed that animals are all also made of cells. So all animals are made of cells. We had Schleiden before that said that plants were made of cells. So you have plants, you have animals, basically coming to this middle ground of everything that's alive is made of cells. And so what Schwann, what Schwann said was, he was a physiologist, and really one of his main things, he looked at the nervous system, and he looked at how nerves worked. And he basically said that he was key in talking about how muscular tissue from the nervous system, it makes up a living thing, makes up the animal, and that was different from how that worked for the plants. His big claim to fame was nerve cells. Actually, they call a certain type of cell a Schwann cell because of him and his discovery. And then that brings us to Rudolf the Red-Nosed Virchow, a German physician. I say that, and I've been calling him Rudolf the Red-Nosed Virchow for a long, long time. In reality, this dude, it was so smart it's not even funny. I have a list here. Here's the list. You'll notice that I have some stuff written down here. Rudolf Virchow was fluent, are you ready? In German, Latin, Greek, Hebrew, English, Arabic, French, Italian, and Dutch. 9 languages that dude spoke, like, fluently. I can barely say those 9 words. Not like the whole language. That's insane. He's really kind of the father of modern medicine. He's one of the first people to use medicine as a regular thing that was helping people. This dude is so smart, it's not even funny. He's ridiculous. Rudolf Virchow, a German physician, noticed that all cells come from existing cells. So he's the one that really kind of knocked this thing out. He's the one that said, hold on a second. If there's rotting garbage and you're saying that a fly maggot comes out of nowhere, that's impossible. It has to come from somewhere. And so he was the first one to say that had to have come from an existing cell. There must have been a cell in the first place. So he's the big one. This one really kind of solidified everything. Pulled together Schleiden's work. It pulled together Schwann's work, put everything together. Virchow put everything together and said, here's the cell theory. Okay? There's your 3 things for the cell theory again. That's what makes up living things. The last thing that we have to do on here is the difference between a prokaryotic and a eukaryotic cell. And we know that prokaryotic cells are simple cells, so there's a big difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells are very simple, like bacteria. Okay? They don't have a lot of organelles. They're small. Okay? Whereas a eukaryotic cells are larger, they're more complex, they use more energy. Eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. Prokaryotic cells don't. Prokaryotic cells' nucleus is floating around in the cytoplasm. Okay, or the DNA, I'm sorry. The prokaryotic cell's DNA is floating around in the cytoplasm. The eukaryotic cell's DNA is inside a nucleus, nice and tight inside a nucleus. So there's a lot of differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, whereas they have similarities too. Some of the similarities are that they both have genetic information. They both have DNA. They both have a cell membrane. They both have cytoplasm. They both reproduce. They both have all of the characteristics of living things that we said before. They come from other cells. They use energy, so both of them do that. They both, I don't know, what other characteristics they have. But a lot of differences, though. If we look at where we are here, prokaryotic, there's some bacterial cells. Those are prokaryotic cells. There's more prokaryotic cells, there's more prokaryotic, and then we get into the larger cells, which are our eukaryotic cells, like a plant cell. So that's when we get into organelles. And I don't want to stop there. I think that that's a good place to end. So have a nice Wednesday, or whatever day it is now that you're watching this. And what's my sign off? Bio for life.